When we think about massive world-changing projects, we usually picture this like master architect.
Right.
Someone standing over a pristine blueprint, drawing a single unbroken line, while an army of just, obedient workers executes the exact plan.
Yeah, the classic top-down approach.
Exactly. But what if you look closer at the construction site and you realize that the local builders are actually actively swapping out those blueprints?
Oh, totally. They're making it their own.
Right. They're adding their own rooms, changing the foundation materials, and suddenly this supposedly monolithic tower looks a lot more like a sprawling, chaotic neighborhood.
That is a great way to put it.
Welcome to the deep dive. Because that sprawling, unpredictable construction site, that is the reality of the single largest infrastructure project in human history. I'm talking about China's Belt and Road Initiative, or the BRI.
It really is. It completely shatters that illusion of a single, unified master plan. I mean, it is just dizzying in scope.
It really is. And for you listening today, we are drawing from this fascinating compilation of research. It's called Global Perspectives on China's Belt and Road Initiative. It's edited by Florine Schneider.
Yeah, and just to set the scale here for you, we are talking about a project with an estimated price tag somewhere between $1 to $8 trillion.
Trillion, with a T.
With a T, exactly. Yep. I mean, it encompasses ports, highways, digital infrastructure, trade agreements across multiple continents, and it is slated to run all the way up to the year 2049.
Which is what, the 100-year anniversary of the People's Republic of China?
Exactly. It's highly symbolic.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the mission for our deep dive today is to move past those simplistic headlines.
Yes, please.
You know the ones, the articles that pop up on your feed painting the BRI as this flawless, top-down Chinese master plan to just take over the world.
Right, the supervillain narrative.
Exactly. Instead, we are going to explore how this initiative actually operates on the messy, real-world ground. We're going to reveal the surprising agency of local actors, the massive export of education, and the incredibly complex rules of international finance and tax that are quietly being rewritten while we aren't looking.
To really understand the reality of the BRI, we first have to look at how China purposefully wants the world to perceive it.
Right.
We have to look at the official branding.
And the branding is, well, it is something else. I mean, our sources describe this incredibly bizarre propaganda video.
Oh my gosh, yes. The 2017 video.
Yes. Released by China's Xinhua news agency. And the crazy thing is they uploaded it to YouTube, which, by the way, is officially blocked in China.
Right, which tells you exactly who the target audience is.
Exactly. So picture this. You have a Chinese rapper, a female choir, millennials dancing in front of global landmarks like the Sydney Opera House.
And the panda. Don't forget the dancing panda.
Yes, the dancing panda. All of them are singing and rapping about mutual benefits and the Silk Road Fund and infrastructure to this catchy, albeit, slightly cringeworthy chorus of Yidai-Lu.
Which translates to One Belt, One Road.
Right. It's just wild.
What's fascinating here is the stark contrast between that polished, somewhat awkward soft power messaging and the actual messy pluralist reality of global geopolitics.
Like night and day?
Totally. The video portrays this benevolent, harmonious, and entirely unified effort. But on the ground, the execution of the BRI is anything but a single entity called China, acting with one mind.
Okay, so it's more fractured.
Exactly. The BRI is actually a highly pluralist endeavor. You have Chinese provincial governments actively competing with each other.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Plus various state-owned enterprises, private companies, and crucially, local actors in the host countries all pushing their own agendas.
It makes me think of a massive franchise model, like a global fast food chain.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, corporate headquarters might have a general brand and a loose set of guidelines, right? Maybe they supply the branding and the initial capital, but the local franchise owner is the one figuring out the menu variations, dealing with local zoning laws, and ultimately manipulating the business to work on their specific street corner.
That is a perfect analogy, and the sources actually point out that much of what we see in the BRI is essentially old wine in new bottles.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning China is frequently just extending the practices of existing institutions, like, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank.
Huh.
They are using very similar development finance models, and as a result, they are often running into the exact same friction.
Like local pushback.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They face identical problems with environmental impacts, local protests, debt sustainability, all the things those older Western institutions have faced for decades. They aren't necessarily subverting the global capitalist system. They are just becoming a massive, heavily resourced new player within it.
Which makes me want to push back on the popular narrative for a second. Is the monolithic China narrative just an easier story for the media to digest?
Oh, absolutely.
It feels like it makes for a scarier, simpler headline. And it completely ignores the fact that these local countries, the franchise owners in our analogy, are actually actively using the BRI for their own domestic, political, and economic survival.
Right, because a monolithic adversary, or benefactor, is just a much easier story to tell than a complex web of thousands of individual
Yeah.
negotiations.
Full of compromises and delays.
Exactly, and local political maneuvering. But recognizing the agency of host countries means acknowledging that they aren't just passive victims,
Hmm.
or even just lucky recipients.
Right, have a say.
They are active participants shaping the 21st century map. I mean, they play competing powers against each other to get better loan terms, or they use Chinese investment to deliver on local campaign promises.
But to build that map, to actually construct those physical roads and ports, you encounter a massive physical friction. You need people.
Yes, human capital.
Because you can pour billions of dollars into a state-of-the-art deep water port, but if the local population doesn't know how to operate the cranes or, run the logistics software, it is just a giant concrete paperweight.
Right, it's useless.
Here's where it gets really interesting. How are they solving that?
Well, the focus on higher education and science and technology is a massive and honestly often completely overlooked pillar of the BRI.
Really?
Yeah. The Chinese government explicitly recognizes that a severe lack of skilled local labor in host countries
Yeah.
is a major bottleneck for their overseas infrastructure projects.
I mean, that makes sense. If you build it, someone has to run it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you have to fly in thousands of Chinese workers for every single project, the costs skyrocket. Plus, local resentment builds really fast.
Oh, right, because the locals aren't getting the jobs.
Precisely. So they have initiated what the sources call an educational Silk Road.
And the centerpiece of this seems to be the Lubin workshops.
Yes, the Lubin workshops. They are named after Luban, who was this legendary 4th century BC father of Chinese architecture and engineering.
Okay.
And essentially, these are vocational training centers set up
Yeah.
directly in host countries.
Right, and the sources mentioned they have popped up all over, places like Thailand, India, Pakistan, Djibouti, and even in European countries like the UK and Portugal.
They're everywhere.
But looking at the curriculum, these aren't just generic trade schools, right? They are specifically designed to train local workers in the exact technical skills using the exact machinery needed to work for Chinese enterprises operating in those regions.
Spot on. And alongside the Lubin workshops, you have the Confucius Institutes.
Right, I've heard of those.
Yeah, they usually focus on teaching the Chinese language and promoting Chinese culture, but they are increasingly being used to promote the BRI directly.
Huh.
And then there's the massive influx of foreign students from BRI countries actually moving to China to study.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's heavily subsidized by Chinese government scholarships. A huge percentage of all international students in China now come from BRI participating nations, and they are there learning Chinese engineering standards and Chinese business practices.
Wow. I look at this and I think about it like installing a new operating system in a country's workforce.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to look at it.
Right. Because if you train an entire generation of local technicians and engineers on Chinese machinery, using Chinese engineering standards and speaking the Chinese language,
You're locking them in.
exactly, you are fundamentally wiring that country's human capital to be perfectly compatible with Chinese industry for decades to come. But I have to ask, is this genuine educational diplomacy aimed at mutual uplift? Or is it just a highly practical, almost mercenary solution to a severe labor shortage for their own overseas projects?
Well, the evidence suggests it serves both purposes simultaneously.
Okay, how so?
From the perspective of the host country, they're getting desperately needed vocational training and educational infrastructure that they likely couldn't afford on their own.
So it is a real benefit.
It is a real tangible benefit for their citizens. But from China's perspective, they are solving an immediate labor bottleneck while simultaneously locking in the long-term technological and educational standards of these emerging economies.
Wow.
They are positioning themselves as the primary exporter of knowledge, not just capital.
Man. Okay, so you have the infrastructure built and you have the local workforce trained on your operating system. But an army of engineers and a shiny new port are giant liabilities if the trade doesn't flow or if the project just bleeds cash.
Oh, absolutely.
And that is where the BRI has had to completely rewrite its playbook. We are moving from human capital to the incredibly complex, behind-the-scenes rulemaking of trade, tax, and development finance.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where we see a fascinating tug of war in China's institutional design.
A tug of war between what?
They're constantly balancing two competing drivers,
Yeah.
efficiency and strategic concerns.
Okay, let's break that down. Efficiency first.
Efficiency is all about reducing transaction costs. Think about what that actually means on the ground. Making sure a cargo container doesn't sit at customs for 3 weeks, racking up storage fees.
Right.
Avoiding double taxation across borders, and just making sure these massive investments actually yield financial returns.
Okay, makes sense. And the strategic concern.
That is entirely different. That is about maximizing geopolitical leverage and securing a dominant position in regional governance.
Let's see how that tension plays out, starting with trade. Because the sources highlight trade as being heavily driven by the strategic concerns.
Yes, very heavily.
The researchers mentioned China purposefully uses shallow sequential trade negotiations.
Right.
I want to clarify how this trap mechanically works, because if I'm signing a deal, I usually want all the terms up front, right?
Which is exactly how the US or the EU typically operates. They negotiate one massive, comprehensive, free trade agreement before breaking ground on anything. China takes the complete opposite approach. They will sign a very basic, shallow agreement just to get a project started. Then, over the course of years, they will initiate round after round of subsequent negotiations to slowly deepen the ties.
Okay. And the specific example the research provides is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or CPEC.
Yes.
So mechanically, if I'm Pakistan, I sign a shallow deal to get a highway built. I rely on Chinese money to finish it.
Right.
3 years later, I need a power plant to actually illuminate that highway and power the surrounding industry. When round 2 of negotiations starts, China holds all the cards, because I'm already locked into their ecosystem and I can't walk away from a half-finished corridor.
That is the exact mechanism. CPEC is essentially the flagship of the BRI. Pakistan currently faces a massive trade deficit with China.
Wow.
Yeah, and economically, the initial agreements really haven't been incredibly favorable to Pakistan's domestic industries.
But they're stuck.
Exactly. Because the negotiations are sequential, and because Pakistan has developed a high strategic dependence on Chinese infrastructure investment, China's bargaining leverage actually increases over time.
That's wild.
The prolonged uncertainty and the phased negotiations serve a strategic geopolitical purpose. It locks the host country in, even if it is less economically efficient in the short term.
That is a brilliant, if, ruthless negotiating tactic. Now, let's look at tax, which sources say falls squarely on the efficiency side.
Yes.
The text mentions a mechanism called BRITICOM, which stands for the Belt and Road Initiative Tax Administration Cooperation Mechanism. Now, looking at this, my first instinct is that this is China trying to act like a global tax auditor.
Pretty much.
Are they essentially just trying to stop multinational construction firms from dodging taxes on these massive infrastructure projects?
That is the core of it, yes.
No.
To understand why this matters, we have to look at a concept tax experts call BEPS.
BPE.
Yeah, base erosion and profit shifting.
Okay, what does that look like in practice?
Well, when a multinational corporation builds a multi-billion-dollar dam in a developing nation, they don't want to pay the local corporate tax rate on their profits.
Of course not.
So they use complex accounting maneuvers to shift those profits, on paper, to a subsidiary in a low-tax jurisdiction, completely depriving the host country of tax revenue.
Oh, wow.
Historically, China wasn't as concerned with this globally, but now, as China becomes a massive capital exporter, they want to ensure that Chinese investments actually yield taxable returns.
Right, they don't want to lose money to corporate loopholes.
Exactly.
So BRITICOM is them actively working with BRI countries to build up their local tax administration capacities.
Precisely. They are actually training local tax authorities on how to spot these accounting tricks. It is a highly efficiency-driven move because they need these host countries to collect taxes so those host countries can actually afford to pay back the Chinese loans.
Which brings us to the actual money, the finance side, which the text describes as a mix of both strategic and efficiency drivers.
Yes, it's a real hybrid.
China relies heavily on its massive domestic policy banks, right?
Right.
Like China Development Bank and Exim Bank, to fund these projects directly. But They have also spearheaded the creation of multilateral institutions.
Right, like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank.
Exactly, the AIIB, and the Multilateral Cooperation Center for Development Finance.
And this dual approach has caused quite a bit of international friction.
I bet.
The EU, for example, has shown cautious pushback. They have raised significant concerns regarding the transparency of Chinese procurement.
Meaning who actually gets the contracts to build these things.
Exactly. And the lack of a level playing field for European businesses. There's also been a lot of anxiety within the EU regarding China's bilateral dealings with specific European nations,
Like what?
like the 17+1 cooperation format in Central and Eastern Europe, or Italy's highly controversial signing of a memorandum of understanding with China.
Right. And we should be very clear here for you listening. Our goal isn't to say who is right or wrong in these geopolitical disputes.
Absolutely not.
We are just looking at the facts on the ground as presented in the sources. The US and the EU have very real concerns about transparency and market access, and China has its own detailed responses defending its models of cooperation. Both realities exist simultaneously in this ecosystem,
Exactly.
but I do want to challenge the logic of the finance side for a second.
Okay, go for it.
If China already has the China Development Bank, which is literally the largest state-backed bank in the world, and they are capable of funding these projects directly and dictating the exact terms,
Yeah.
why on earth would they go through the headache of creating multilateral institutions like the AIIB that require them to share decision-making power with dozens of other countries?
It's a great question, and it goes back to that tension between efficiency and strategy. First, strategically, creating the AIIB allows China to step into a global leadership role. They are setting the rules of regional finance rather than just participating in Western-led institutions like the World Bank.
Oh, I see.
But more importantly, it is an efficiency play. Multilateral banks have decades of experience in environmental risk management, social impact studies, and complex project feasibility.
Which China maybe didn't have as much of.
Exactly. By bringing in international partners, China is trying to mitigate the massive financial risks they're taking on. They are actively trying to learn international best practices to prevent their trillions of dollars in loans from going bad in highly volatile regions.
So they are essentially crowdsourcing risk management.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, we have the money, but you guys have the experience figuring out if this dam is actually going to collapse.
That's pretty much it.
Okay, so we've established the how, the human capital, the tax codes, the financial plumbing. Now we have to talk about the where.
Right, the geography.
And this is where the story takes a massive geographical pivot that officially wasn't even supposed to happen. We are looking at Latin America and the Caribbean.
This is a fascinating evolution of the original blueprint. Prior to 2017, official Chinese documents and maps explicitly excluded the Western Hemisphere from the Belt and Road Initiative.
Really, completely excluded.
Completely. It was positioned purely as an initiative connecting Asia, Africa, and Europe along the historical Silk Road routes. But post-2017, we saw a sudden, dramatic flurry of memoranda of understanding being signed across the Americas.
And what stands out to me is the geography of this expansion. The heavy hitters of South America, massive commodity-rich nations like Brazil and Mexico, they haven't actually signed BRI most.
Nope.
And this is despite having deep, booming trade ties with China dating back to the early 2000s. Instead, this new wave of BRI diplomacy is heavily concentrated in Central America and the Caribbean. We are talking about countries like Panama, El Salvador, and the Dominican Republic.
The timing is critical there, too.
Oh.
Yeah, it is not a coincidence that those specific countries notably switched their diplomatic recognition from Taiwan to the People's Republic of China right around the exact same time they signed on to the BRI. It really highlights how the BRI is used as a diplomatic reward and a tool for solidifying political alignments.
But the physical projects look different here too, right? It is not just deep water ports and highways anymore.
No, the nature of the infrastructure is changing.
We are seeing the rise of the digital Silk Road. The sources mention a new fiber optic cable linking Africa directly to Brazil, built entirely by Chinese firms.
Right.
And in East Africa, there are reports of the Ethiopian government specifically requesting surveillance tools from China. Plus, there is the Health Silk Road, which obviously gained massive prominence during the global COVID-19 pandemic.
And as you might expect, this expansion into the Americas has triggered intense pushback from the United States.
Right, their strategic backyard.
Exactly. The U.S. historically views the region that way. We saw this play out very clearly when U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo visited Panama to issue these really stark warnings about the risks of doing business with Chinese state-owned enterprises.
So again, looking at this impartially through the lens of our sources, we are witnessing a classic great power rivalry playing out.
Yes.
But the battlefield has shifted from military bases to digital networks and health diplomacy.
That's exactly what's happening.
So what does this all mean? To me, it feels remarkably like a tech company expanding into a fierce rival's home turf.
Okay, I like this.
Right. They know they can't go in and immediately replace the rival's flagship product, which in this case is the deep historical, economic, and security ties with the United States.
Right, that's too heavy a lift.
So instead, they come in with highly targeted niche offerings. They say, hey, we know you buy U.S. goods, but we'll lay your fiber optic cables. We'll build this specific bridge your politicians have been promising for a decade. We'll provide some critical medical tech. It is a way to get a sticky foothold in the ecosystem. But I have to ask, is this actual transformative new investment for these Caribbean and Central American countries? Or is it just a clever rebranding of infrastructure deals that were going to happen anyway, just slapping a shiny Belt and Road sticker on them for a press conference?
Well, the sources indicate it is genuinely a mix of both, which really speaks to the adaptability of the initiative.
Okay.
In some cases, like the Caribbean, the BRI provides access to vital capital for cash-strapped nations that traditional lenders, like the IMF, had backed away from due to credit risks.
So that's real new money.
Yes, that is new money altering the physical landscape.
Hmm.
But in other cases, it absolutely is a rebranding exercise.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Local politicians get to announce a flashy new Silk Road project to win votes, and Chinese firms get to show Beijing they are fulfilling the national strategy, even if the project was fully on the drawing board years before the BRI even existed.
Which brings us beautifully back to where we started.
It does.
The BRI is not a flawless, unified master plan drawn by a single architect. It is a messy, highly adaptable, and pluralist network.
Exactly.
It is being shaped just as much by opportunistic local politicians in Panama or vocational students in a Lubin workshop in Thailand learning to operate a crane, and regional tax administrators trying to close corporate loopholes, as it is by the top leadership in Beijing.
It is a fluid ecosystem, not a rigid monolith, and recognizing that complexity, the friction, the local agency, the trial and error, is really the only way to accurately analyze its real-world successes and its failures.
And why does this matter to you listening to this right now?
Yeah, why should they care?
Whether you were prepping for a global strategy meeting or trying to make sense of international supply chains or just insanely curious about how the world works, it matters because understanding that the Belt and Road Initiative means understanding the fundamental plumbing of the 21st century global economy. It is about who sets the international trade rules, who lays the digital fiber optic cables carrying the data you rely on every day, and who is training the next generation of engineers. It is the literal infrastructure of the future being built in real time right in front of us.
This raises an important question, though, one that really challenges the very foundation of everything we've discussed today.
Okay, what is it?
Well, we've talked extensively about the agency of the local countries hosting these projects, how they aren't just passive recipients.
Right, the local builders altering the architect's pristine blueprint.
Exactly that. So what happens when those developing nations, emboldened by their own agency, their critical geographic importance, and the infrastructure they now possess, decide to systematically rewrite the terms of the agreements?
Oh, wow.
Right. If the true lasting power of the Belt and Road Initiative lies in the local nodes of the network, what happens when the investor suddenly finds themselves entirely at the mercy of the invested?
That is a fascinating thought. It makes you wonder who is really constructing the building and who is just paying for the bricks.
It really does.
Something to think about. Until next time, keep diving deep.